Well, hey, folks, it's a spoiler alert, but William Wild Bill Zelenski has been convicted of murder in the first degree. You can watch this entire video and catch my thoughts just before this went to the jury, and then you can watch the closing statements from the prosecution and the defense. But I didn't want to miss the chance to let you know right up front, we know he's guilty of murder. Well, here we are, folks. The state of Wisconsin is arguing that Wild Bill, William Zelenski, should be found guilty for murdering 18-year-old Ryelee Powell, something that he said, or the state says, that he did in retaliation for Ryelee stealing guns, money, and exotic pets from him. Now, the defense says Zelenski just bumped into the alleged thief and he shot him out of fear for his life when a fight broke out. What do you think happened in this case of the alleged exotic pet murderer? Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil. Hit that like and subscribe button. And again, as the weekend is coming, we're moving quickly on cases. This case is going to the jury. And if you're new to this case, go back and watch my overview case from yesterday. But for now, let's go straight in to the closing arguments.
977 days ago, he lost his life. He lost his life when Bill Zelenski put a shotgun, double-barreled, in his armpit and pulled the trigger. Dr. Kovac testified that the shotgun blast at that close range caused Rylee's death, tore open the bottom of his heart, his aorta. Dr. Kovac opined that he had maybe 10 or 15 seconds of life after that blast. We know Bill Zelenski pulled the trigger and shot Ryelee. He called 911 and he said, Ryelee Manente was walking home. I confronted him. He came at me and I shot him. Throughout the investigation, he claimed it was self-defense. Except that Ryelee Manente-Powell did not have a gun. He did not have a knife. He did not have a baseball bat. He had no weapons on him. He was walking home. Bill said he was walking home from the jail where he had been transported because he owed money on a New London fine, municipal court. An intentional homicide requires that the defendant cause the death with the intent to kill. But if you listen to the judge's instructions, it doesn't mean that on the morning of October 19th, Bill intended to kill Ryelee. I don't believe that. I don't think any of you believe that. It doesn't mean that when he drove to Mill Street, or was started to drive to Mill Street, that he thought, I'm going to go to Mill Street and kill Ryelee Manente-Powell. Of course not. But as the judge instructed you, that intent to kill can be formed in an instant. And I submit to you that when you pull the trigger of a double-barreled 12-gauge shotgun, which you've already pulled back the hammers, that is intent to kill. It's also in the instructions that intent to kill is the mental purpose to take the life or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause the death. Anybody experienced in firearms, you don't have to be experienced in firearms to know that if you put a shotgun against the person and press into them downward, and pull the trigger, that it's practically certain they're going to die. Now that's the information we knew back on October 19th, 2020, 977 days ago. As of June 19th, 2023, at the beginning of this trial, he wants you to believe that pulling the trigger was an accident. It was Rylee's fault. He didn't tell the dispatcher it was an accident. He didn't tell Tiffany Powell it was an accident, Rylee's own mother. He didn't tell Tara Dalrymple it was an accident when she was at the scene screaming, "Why did you do this?" In fact, he said, "He came at me, I had no choice." Does that sound like an accident? 977 days later, it's an accident. But it wasn't an accident on October 19th, 2020. He didn't tell any of the officers who arrived on scene that it was an accident. He didn't tell Officer Wasrud, Shabilsky, Deputy Thorpe. He told no one until this week. He had 977 days to come up with the accident scenario. That was 977 days that Ryelee didn't have. Now, he testified yesterday on how he was terrified of Ryelee. But he also testified about all of his police training, that once or twice a month he'd come across hostile subjects. He talked about how he was learned to de-escalate situations. He learned how to control a subject, how to place somebody under arrest. So when it's convenient for him, he draws on this police training that at the time he hadn't used in over 15 years when he was separated from the city of Waupaca. But when it's not convenient for him, all thoughts of his police training go out the window. He told you that it was self-defense because he was so terrified of Ryelee. He told you that he turned down Van Street because he had to go tell Tara not to give a ride. All he talked about to everyone was that I need to get the animals back. I need to make sure they're safe. We saw a lot about the timeline that was being prepared here. Please wait. And very familiar with this timeline after this week. But I made an addition to this timeline. Something, can you do it? That's better.
Your Honor, may we approach?
We are on the record outside the presence of the jury. Mr. Hogan, I take it you're objecting. It says Bill learns location of reptiles.
Specifically, the objection is to the 10:15 and 28 seconds p.m. That was not testified to at all.
Your Honor, that's math. There was testimony at 10:17:45. Bill's call with Danielle ends. We played the call. At the moment that on the call they gave the address of the reptiles, the testimony was there was 2 minutes and 17 seconds left on that phone call. 2 minutes and 17 seconds subtracted from 10:17:45 equals 10:15:28. It's math.
Mr. Hogan.
Your Honor, my recollection of the testimony was when that phone call started and the time in which on the recording there was. I don't recall any testimony of anybody indicating a particular amount of time left in the phone call.
That was the purpose of that testimony, was to identify the exact time that they knew the animal's location. It was the purpose of the phone call that we played. And at the time that Mr. Szilagyi stopped the recording, we put into the record how much time was left. It was for exactly this purpose. I know I didn't do the math, but I don't believe math is a fact that can't be presented. In fact, I have my slip here where I was going.
This is argument. I'm going to allow it, and you're certainly free to argue. That's not what the evidence is. You know, it's an interpretation of evidence, so I'm going to allow it. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. So as I was saying, at 10:15 and 28 seconds is when Bill and Tiffany learned the location of the reptiles. And where does that number come from? We played that call. And if you recall, we stopped as soon as she gave the address out on Highway 10. And the second that she ended it, that she said the address, we had 2 minutes and 17 seconds left on that call. On Mr. Hogan's exhibit, we know that the call ended at 10:17:45. 10:17:45 minus 2 minutes and 17 seconds is 10:15. So because we're using this timeline throughout this trial, Bill parked in front of Tara's house at 10:17 and 26 seconds. Van Street is 400 feet long. He had almost 2 full minutes where he's driving down School Street that he knew where the location of the animals were. He knew exactly where they were. And everything he told you is that's what is most important. Now, this week, he wants you to believe that after seeing Ryelee walking, he turned down Van Street because he had to tell Tara, make sure you don't give him a ride. One of the discussions you're going to have when you go back into the jury room is what if his testimony is reasonable? To say that he would stop, and not only stop, but park out on the road instead of just driving in next to her door, hopping out saying, don't give Ryelee a ride, hop back in and go get your animals. No, he's going to park out on the street when he just saw Ryelee. He's going to park out on the street and he's going to walk down her driveway because he said the door they use is at the back. And he told you the reason for that was he was afraid he was going to get parked in. At 10:17 at night, Monday night, school night, he's afraid he's going to get parked in. Well, at that point, if you're that desperate for your animals, drive across the lawn. He's afraid he's going to get parked in, so he parks on the street. And now he tells you, or then he told you, that he saw Ryelee running around the corner from School Street onto Van Street. And again, 400 feet long, 6 houses. Tara's house is on here. We also have the house with the Ring camera, and we have the Bricko's house. We know those houses. Somewhere in the area of the video starting, I believe it was somewhere back here. I couldn't see the stick figure he wrote, but he saw Ryelee running. Now, Bill testified he had gotten out of his car and was walking up Tara's driveway to tell her, don't give Ryelee a ride. And he saw Ryelee running down the street at him, shouting, I'm going to get you, you MF. I'm going to beat your ass. And that caused him such terror that he went back down the driveway to his car, grabbed a stun gun, grabbed a double-barreled shotgun, opened the double-barreled shotgun, loaded it, closed it, and pulled the hammers back, which is essentially taking off any safety. ready to fire. Common sense, logic. If Ryeelee's running down this road and he sees him even a third of the way down the road, though he said he saw him at the corner, but the picture the defense put up, it was pitch black. Even if he saw him at the corner, by the time Bill got back, could hear what Ryelee was supposedly yelling at him, loaded his gun, and then met Ryelee. He met him right in front of the house with the doorbell camera. So all of this takes place right out here. Ryelee would have been at the car long before he ever got a gun out. And how do we explain that on the doorbell cam, Ryeelee's standing there? Now the timing that makes sense is that Ryeelee's walking down the street and he sees his mother and her boyfriend pull down the road. And all the testimony is Ryelee spends a lot of time with his mother and Bill. He's been in their car. They had already confronted him about the thefts and he was offended, but he said he didn't steal. There's no indication that he was afraid of Bill. So he's walking down the street. And the evidence is, according to Google Maps, it takes about 2 minutes to walk down the street. So where would he be after a minute? Bill parks in front of Tara's house at 10:17, and they're arguing at 10:18. 1 minute and 4 seconds. So what happened in that 1 minute and 4 seconds? I can guarantee you if Ryelee was running full blast, he would have been at the car. He wouldn't have only been halfway down the street. But if he was walking, he would have been halfway down the street. He's going to see what his mom and Bill are up to. Perfectly reasonable. And now Bill wants you to say that he was allowed to use self-defense because Ryelee was yelling at him that he was going to beat his ass. And that caused him such terror that he believed he was going to die. Because as the judge read the instructions, the only way he gets to use deadly force is if he believes he is going to die. And there has to be an unlawful interference with Bill. So as Ryeelee's walking down the street, what unlawful interference? You know where the unlawful interference is on Ryelee. He's walking down the street. You see him stop. You see Bill and Tiffany come to him, not the other way around. Bill comes to him. And you know, when I think about this case after hearing the testimony, did Tiffany know that the hammers were pulled back? Did Tiffany know when she lifted the gun and it was pointed at her son's head that the slightest pull on one of those triggers and he would have been dead? Anybody, common sense, gun safety, you don't run around with a double-barreled shotgun with the hammers pulled back. That's intent. There's the only evidence that there was an unlawful interference on Bill is his self-serving testimony this week that he had 977 days to come up with. Ryelee runs away from Bill. And when you talk about self-defense, don't forget that Ryelee had the right to defend himself. Just because he's the 18-year-old kid and it's the adult who has the gun doesn't mean he doesn't have the right to defend himself. The judge talked to you about provocation. And as he starts to read it, it gets pretty confusing. So I wanted to pull that up. I believe Bill Zelenski provoked any attack Ryelee did on Bill. Ryelee is standing on the street, according to the doorbell video. Bill confronts him. Bill told the 911 operator he confronted him. Bill confronted him and is trying to get him with the taser. Now remember Rowan? Rowan told you that before Bill left the house on East Road, he said, I'm going to tase and handcuff Ryelee. So while Bill tells you his biggest concern was the animals, I think his biggest concern was taking Ryelee into custody, because during that whole week, he was acting as a cop. He was investigating the crime. It was going to be solved on the street. He was interviewing people. He was emailing and texting everybody he knew to be on the lookout. And that night, he decided he was going to arrest Ryelee. That's what the evidence is. That's what shows on the video. Except he's not a law enforcement officer. He was separated from the force 15 years earlier. He didn't have training, and he didn't have the right. He did not have the right to handcuff Ryelee. He did not have the right to attack him and tase him. He did not have the right to point a firearm at him, much less pull the trigger and kill him. He did not have that right. In the confrontation, Ryelee never armed himself. All those weapons, that's how Bill drove around Wapaka, with all those weapons in the car. But we heard from Detective Rodans where those weapons were. There was another gun in the trunk. We saw Ryelee didn't go in the trunk. There were knives in the back seat, baseball bat in the back seat, whatever this garden tool is, in the back seat, a hammer. Ryelee went to the door of the car. He didn't get in. And as you saw, there weren't weapons within reach. And Bill was right there watching him. And Bill took the gun back from Tiffany. Now remember, he testified the hammers were pulled back. If the attack, which follows Bill's provocation, attacking Ryelee, if for some reason after that Bill reasonably believed that he was in imminent danger of death or great bodily harm, he may lawfully act in self-defense. But the person may not use or threaten force intended or likely to cause death unless he has exhausted every other reasonable means to escape. And that's Bill has to exhaust every other reasonable means of escape. What means did he have? Well, he could have driven away. The car was running, the doors were open. He could have just driven away. He told you he was afraid the car would stall. Anybody who's driven a stick shift, what happens if the car stalls? You start it up again. You close the windows, you lock the doors. What's going to happen to him in the car? What could unarmed Ryelee do to him if he's in the car? And if it stalls, just start it again. He could have run to Tara's house. He could have just honked the horn. If he just honked the horn and stayed on the horn, that would have gotten the attention of every neighbor. He could have locked the gun in the car. His fear was that Ryelee was going to get the gun from him and use it on him. And he said, I knew I'd be dead. Well, lock the gun in the car. Because Ryelee wanting to punch him in the face is not a reason to shoot him. It is not a reason to kill him. And Ryelee saying, 18-year-old kid, put the gun down and fight like a man. Sounds like an 18-year-old kid. An 18-year-old kid who says put the gun down and fight like a man, that causes a former police officer such terror that he has to shoot him? That he has to have a loaded gun with the hammers pulled back, ready to fire? It's absurd. There was just about a minute between the end of the video that showed the confrontation and the 911 call. So we don't know what happened in that minute. Tiffany said Ryelee never grabbed the gun. But you know what? It was pressed onto his skin. And you know what? If he grabbed the gun and tried to get it away from him, he has that right. He absolutely has that right. He has the right not to die. And think about Bill's explanation of the shooting and how it was Rylee's fault. Well, for one, he's experienced in firearms. You don't put your finger in the trigger. He did it because he was so terrified. Because Ryelee was trying to get the gun from him, he put his finger in the trigger. Well, if you're going back and forth, guess what? You're going to pull the trigger. That doesn't make it Rylee's fault. But when you think about the wound that's almost under his armpit. Melissa, close your eyes, please. It is almost to his armpit. And I'm going to take it off now. It's off. His armpit. Rylee's pulling the gun in there with two hands. One on the foregrip, one on the barrel, conveniently where DNA was found. Yeah, I believe. But this is what you would do. You wouldn't go like this. That makes no sense whatsoever. And he would have had to been leaning in because it was a downward trajectory. Bill and Ryelee are the same height. So he would have had to been down and leaning in. The gun would have had to been elevated. Two hands on it. That story makes no sense. We don't know what happened, but we know that didn't happen. Because you would go like this. Bill motioned on the stand that he was going like this. But that makes no sense because it's nowhere near there. Bill's story makes no sense. Timing is so far off. The fact that he was terrified for his life because Ryelee yelled, "I want to beat your ass." And then he tried to tell you why he was so terrified of Ryelee. Now, we acknowledge there was a domestic incident in February. And if everybody who has a domestic incident in Wapaka County could be hunted down with a shotgun, we'd have much lower population. They're not good, but they happen. But to think that a domestic incident in February means that Bill Zelenski is terrified of Ryelee in October? And every other incident that Bill talked about was Bill's own testimony. But he did testify Ryelee had never hit him, ever. They did verbal sparring. 18-year-old, I'm going to get you. Big man. Probably didn't like Bill. Probably would have wished his mother wasn't his girlfriend. Never testified Ryelee said he was going to kill him. Never testified that there was anything that would have caused him such terror. And you remember when he was talking to Officer Wazru downtown? And he's talking about, the fight they had before the animals disappeared. No fear. There was no fear in his voice whatsoever. Wouldn't that be the time that it would have shown? Wouldn't it have shown in the 911 call? See, there again, he wants you to believe his police training made him so calm that he could just call, say, Ryelee was walking home, I confronted him. he came at me and I shot him. He doesn't say he tried to grab the gun from me. Nope, he came at me and I shot him. Calm. Tiffany's calm. The one you hear is Tara, who's hysterical. The father of her grandchild is laying there and no one's helping him. And let's talk about police training. CPR, stop the bleeding, roll him over and see if he's alive. Nothing, not a thing, not a bit of aid was rendered to that poor boy. And now they want you to rule, to judge his actions and his statements and say it was all reasonable. His terror was reasonable. Well, there was no sign of that terror 977 days ago. Not a sign. Not till this week. The judge gave you instructions on credibility of witnesses. Do they have a reason to lie? Well, does he have a reason to lie? He shot someone in cold blood and killed him. Does he have a reason to lie? Mariah Bricko testified when she was looking out the window, she heard, "Stop or I'll shoot you." And then pow. That is an intentional homicide. That is not an accident. That is not self-defense. That is an intentional homicide. And to think that it was Ryelee who said that makes no sense. Ryelee never had a gun. The person with the gun was Bill Zelenski. Stop or I'll shoot you. And he did. And at the end of your deliberations, I'm asking you to find Bill Zelenski guilty of first-degree intentional homicide in taking the life of an 18-year-old boy. Thank you.
Accidents happen. Crimes are committed. We all know Bill didn't commit a crime that night. We know from the evidence presented in this case that Bill didn't act with an intent to kill Ryelee. He didn't act with an intent to hurt Ryelee. In the moment that Ryelee was shot, there was a struggle over that gun, and Ryelee was pulling it away, causing Bill's finger to hit that trigger. It's sad. This is a sad case. The judge is going to read you one more instruction or two. One of the final instructions tells you, base your decision not on sympathy, but on the facts. It's a sad case where an 18-year-old lost his life. We saw so many witnesses through this trial how they felt when they found out Ryelee passed away. We saw everyone's reaction trying to talk about what happened that night. Everybody who knew Ryelee, Bill included. And it wasn't just Bill on the witness stand when he broke down trying to talk about Ryelee. When Officer Rodens first told Bill, this is the first time Bill is told that Ryelee didn't make it. You saw his reaction in that video. His face was slightly behind a mask, but you saw those tears in his eyes. You saw him doing this. That's also a man who cared about Ryelee, who was devastated to find out that Ryelee didn't make it. Don't be swayed by the sympathy in this case in reaching your verdict. Look at the facts that we all heard. Everybody that you heard through about what Bill was going to do that night talked about Bill wanted the animals. Bill wanted to bring them home safely. Nobody said he only wanted to find the animals. Everybody said he wanted to find them and bring them home safely that night. Tara tells you, she testified that when Bill and Tiffany came over, they were asking about the animals. If she'd heard any information about the animals. She even told you that right before Bill and Tiffany leave, Tiffany says, if you see Ryelee, tell him we're not angry. We just want to get the animals back. Now she tries to tell you that Bill was agitated. And remember what she told you, what made Bill agitated? Daisha showing Bill and Tiffany the Snapchat video and photo. But we heard from Tiffany, we heard from Bill, we heard from Rowan that while they're still at East Road, they received that Snapchat information. That wouldn't have caused Bill to become agitated at Tara's house. It was information he already knew. She said he was calm. When he left, he was calm. Bill knew Ryelee was involved, but was still calm. All he wanted to know was where the animals were so he could go get them and bring them home safely. When he met with Officer Wazrud testified, Bill was calm. He expressed concern about the animals. He expressed concern that when finding out Ryelee might be released from jail that night, that Ryelee could go and move or get rid of or stash the evidence. And Bill would not be able to get them and bring them home safely. April testified that when Bill left, all he wanted to do was find the animals and bring them home safely. Not a single person told you that Bill was so angry, so upset with Ryelee, that he wanted to hurt him, much less kill him. Nobody testified about that. We can see in that timeline that Bill left East Road and shortly into his drive was told, avoid Mill Street. Law enforcement's already on scene. And Bill knows, hopefully law enforcement's going to get some information. So he doesn't go to Mill Street. He hangs out on Main Street for a while. Then he goes to Tara's house. And you saw there's no urgency at that time. He pulls in the driveway behind Tara, drives all the way to the back by her garage, following Tara down that driveway. Because there's no urgency at that point. He's killing some time waiting for the police to let him know some information about where these animals might be. But he's not there long because he gets that phone call from Officer Wazrud to come and meet him on Main Street. Even Tara told you on the stand that when they left, they said, we'll be back. We know Bill was driving in the direction of Tara's house after he met with Officer Wazrud. We don't know exactly at what point in his drive from Main Street back to Van Street that he did get that phone call from Danielle. But he was driving back to Tara's house. And yes, at some point during that drive, they found out where the animals were. That was part of that priority that night. Bringing them home safely was the other part of his main priority. And so when he sees Ryelee, he doesn't even know that that's Ryelee down the road on School Street in the distance. He thinks it could be. So he turns onto Van Street, drives all the way down and parks in front of Tara's house. because he's going to tell Tara, don't give Ryelee a ride. If that's Ryelee and he's going to come over here, don't give him a ride. Because Bill knows, Ryelee now knows where these animals are. And if he's going to be released from the jail and come get these animals, there's going to be a confrontation at Angela's house. And Angela said to Bill and Tiffany, I don't want any trouble. I don't want the police over here. They were over here earlier. Don't bring any trouble. I don't want any trouble here. So he parks on the road because he is just going to run in and tell Tara not to give Ryelee a ride. Ryelee got a ride everywhere. Ryelee didn't have a driver's license. Ryelee didn't have a car. He got rides everywhere. From Madison, from Mackenzie, the daughters of Tara, who could be at Tara's house. Tara doesn't know where these animals are. And the state, in cross-examining Bill, said, well, it would be obvious that Tara wouldn't give Ryelee a ride to Angela's. Why? Tara didn't know the animals were over at Angela's. It wouldn't be all that strange for Ryelee to come over and ask for a ride. And in closing, the state tried to get you to believe that Bill's testimony was he got out of his car after he parked and he was walking down Tara's driveway. But that's not what Bill told you. Bill told you he got out of his car and started to walk towards Tara's driveway. Didn't even make it to Tara's driveway, and he sees somebody off in the distance running at him. He doesn't know who that is until Ryelee speaks and is yelling, I'm gonna get you, which is the same thing that he told Bill right before Bill's firearms went missing. When Bill saw Ryelee running down the road at him, threatening him, the state keeps telling you, well, Ryelee was unarmed. We know Ryelee was unarmed. He didn't have a weapon on him. Bill believed he could have a weapon because Ryelee had stolen guns from him. Ryelee could have other weapons on him. Bill told you, in his experience, if you get brought to the jail and you have weapons that you're legally allowed to have, knives, and you're released, they're going to give them back to you. There's no reason for the police to hold on to your knife if you're going to be released, and you can legally have that knife. So as Rylee's charging down the road at Bill on this dark street, Bill has no idea that Ryelee could be unarmed. He believes Ryelee is armed. That's why he goes back to his car and he gets that shotgun. Because Ryelee can be armed, and if Ryelee has a weapon, he's gonna get Bill. Those are Rylee's words. And all of the prior experience Bill had with Ryelee, seeing Ryelee chase Mackenzie, knowing that he beat up Mackenzie, got into fights at the jail, threatened him, threatened Tiffany just days before this incident. That's why Bill grabs his gun. Tiffany had got out of the car and they're on the road seeing Ryelee come at him. He's not walking. Nobody said that Ryelee was just walking down Van Street. Because where he was when Bill saw him was down School Street. And the state presented evidence that to walk the distance of Van would take 2 minutes. More than 2 minutes if Rylee's down School Street. But Rylee's there in just over a minute. Because he's running. running down School Street, running around the corner, and running directly at Bill. Even Tiffany testified to that Ryelee was running down the road. So he gets the gun in an attempt to stop Ryelee. The state told you Bill testified when he grabbed that gun, he loaded it and pulled the hammers back. That wasn't Bill's testimony. Bill's testimony was, I don't remember when the hammers were pulled back. He didn't say, I grabbed that gun and I loaded it quick and I pulled the hammers back. No, he didn't do that because he wasn't intending to use that gun. He wasn't intending to shoot Ryelee. He was intending to stop the threat that was barreling towards him. And the sight of a gun would hopefully stop Ryelee from advancing towards him. We saw that use of form sheet that the state presented. Simply displaying a firearm is use of force that can hopefully stop a threat from coming towards you. And so Bill got his shotgun and he approached where Ryelee was running at him. Hopefully, Ryelee would stop. And at some point, he did stop on the street, right in front of Joseph Brown's house. And that's where the video starts. But Ryelee didn't just magically appear standing in one spot. He was running down the street at Bill, and Bill was trying to stop any more advancement coming towards him. And Ryelee was looking to fight. We heard Ryelee several times, put down the gun and fight me like a man. So when Bill and Ryelee are close, we see this video. We're going to play it one more time for you. And watch. Ryelee doesn't have his jacket on. When he takes his jacket off because he wants to fight Bill, Bill told you at that moment, I thought it was unlikely that Ryelee had any sort of weapon. So what does Bill do at that point? When he now believes Ryelee may not be armed, he gives Tiffany the gun and gets his taser. Because now he knows, now I really don't need to use this gun. I never wanted to use it. I never intended to use it because I don't want to kill Ryelee. I just want to stop him from coming towards me. So that's why he takes out his taser and attempts to subdue Ryelee. And it's not until Ryelee runs to the car. And remember the testimony? Rylee's been in Bill's car before. Ryelee knows all of these weapons are in Bill's car. Knives scattered about his car, in the center console, near the ashtray, in the passenger side area, in the glove box. There's weapons in the back seat. It's not until Ryelee runs back to the car where he knows there's weapons, Bill knows there's weapons, that Bill gets the gun. But he doesn't go up to Ryelee and point the gun at Ryelee because he can see Ryelee doesn't grab a weapon. And when Ryelee gets away from the car and starts coming at Bill, put down the gun and fight me like a man, we see that Bill's not pointing the gun at him because he doesn't want to use it. We see Bill backing up, having the gun pointed towards the ground, just like we can see. Now, the other important thing that we saw in this case is the positioning right at the end of that video and the beginning of the next. On the left of your screen is the very end screenshot of the video right before the shot rings out. And on the right is the screenshot of the very start of the next video. And I want you to look and I want you to pay attention to where Bill is standing before that gunshot and where Ryelee is after the gunshot. Bill didn't go towards Ryelee. Ryelee came at Bill. Ryelee came at Bill and the gun went off. Those were Tiffany's words. Ryelee came at Bill and the gun went off. And we know, even though Tiffany said, I don't think Ryelee grabbed the gun. She says, I think I saw the gun the whole time. But she even admitted on that stand that when Ryelee went at Bill, Rylee's back was to Bill. Or Ryeelee's back was to Tiffany. Tiffany couldn't see his arms. Tiffany couldn't see the gun. Tiffany didn't see what Ryelee and Bill were doing with the gun. Because Ryelee came at Bill, grabbed that gun, and tried to pull it away from Bill. The state wants you to believe that it's absurd or it doesn't make sense that Ryelee would have been reaching for the gun and pulling it when it went off. But we saw that. We saw with a gun that Officer Rodens told you had the same measurements as the shotgun used in this case. And this blue tape is the exact location where the foregrip was on the shotgun, and this blue tape was exactly where the flashlight was. And when we had Dr. Kovac on the stand, he told you, if somebody's leaning forward and pulling the gun, that this position is consistent with the injuries that Ryelee had. Because this is moderately downward, it's front to back, and left to right. It's the exact trajectory of the BBs. That's what Dr. Kovac told you. The state wants you to believe that Ryelee was on his knees with his hands up in the air when Bill shot him. In that video that we saw, we know that the shooting happens and Bill is able to get the phone and speak to 911 in an exact minute after that video ends. As Rylee's trying to come towards Bill saying, put down the gun and fight me like a man. And the state wants you to believe that Ryelee went up to Bill, said, okay, Bill, I give up. That's what the state wants you to believe. Because that's the only other way that Ryelee gets the injuries that Dr. Kovac told you about. That doesn't make sense.
The fact's not in evidence.
Or argument.
It's argument. Proceed.
In her opening statement, the state told you the gun was in a downward trajectory. And imagine the positions of the body that it would have to be in. There's no other way Ryelee gets those injuries with that trajectory unless he's either on his knees or grabbing the gun and pulling it towards himself. Which one is consistent with that video that we saw? We know that that's what happened because it's consistent with the neighbors, Mariah and Nathaniel Bricko. The only people that you heard in this case that have no connection to Ryelee except the officers and the experts. All the other citizen witnesses that you heard from have some sort of connection to Bill or Ryelee, but not the Brickos. And what did Nate Bricko tell you? That he looked out, he turned on the light, and we even saw in those screenshots, it was a little bit lighter because that was the Bricko's front porch light that came on. And he says when he looked out, he saw what he initially described as a struggle. He then said, well, maybe it wasn't a struggle, but they were definitely close. It looked like they were touching. Because from his distance, seeing Ryelee and Bill struggling over that weapon and pulling it, that's what he saw. That's the struggle that he was describing in his written statement. And Mariah told you in her written statement that she heard very clearly, I'm going to shoot you if you don't stop. If Bill intended to kill Ryelee, why is he saying that? He's saying that because Ryelee came up to him, grabbed the gun, they're struggling, and Bill said, if you don't stop, I'm going to shoot you. That's what Mariah said she heard very clearly. And right when Nate saw that struggle and they heard a mention of a shooting, Nate said he immediately turned, went inside, grabbed his son, and under a minute later, he heard a muffled gunshot. Because that was Ryelee pulling the gun into himself, causing the gun to go off. Those are the only witnesses that don't have a connection to Ryelee or Bill. They can be believed. Other injuries are consistent with Ryelee pulling the gun away from Bill, causing it to go off. Remember the state introduced evidence of Bill's finger and how Dr. Kovac told you that that would happen? If Bill's finger isn't, or if the butt of the gun isn't against Bill's shoulder and the gun kicks back and it hits your finger, that's what could cause the injury to Bill's finger. Just like when Ryelee reached, grabbed it, and was pulling it, the butt of the shotgun came away from Bill's body, causing his finger to hit that trigger, discharging the gun, causing the trigger guard to go back onto Bill's finger. There's no other way that Bill's finger gets injured in that way. Also consider, if Ryelee is on his knees when he gets shot, we saw the image of Ryelee forward. But if he's straight up and down and gets shot, and the force of that shot, where is Ryelee going to go? He's going to go this way. But that's not what we saw. Because Dr. Kovac told you if Ryelee grabbed the gun, pulled it, got shot, he could fall straight down. Just in the exact position that we saw. It's consistent with the DNA evidence. How does Rylee's DNA get on that foregrip unless he grabs it? His DNA is located in that mixture with the highest likelihood ratio that the state laboratory has. Rarer than the entire world's population. 1 in 7 trillion. We know that's Rylee's DNA on that foregrip, because there was so much of that DNA when he grabbed it and was trying to pull the gun away from Bill. Kevin Scott told you that when there's friction and pressure applied, that's when you're going to leave more DNA behind, as Ryelee did when he grabbed it and was trying to pull it. Why doesn't Bill assist Ryelee? Bill told you he thought Ryelee was still a threat. Tara told you when she came running outside, she saw Ryelee on his knees with no blood. She thought Ryelee was faking it. She didn't think Ryelee had actually been shot. She thought Ryelee was faking it. And if she thought Ryelee was faking it, what about Bill? This is a person who just said, put down the gun, fight me like a man, came at Bill and grabbed that gun. If he gets up, he's still a threat to Bill. So Bill does what he believes to be the best. Get that phone, call 911, and get them there as soon as possible, which is exactly what he does. Yes, Bill did not try to render aid to Ryelee, because the state just pointed out in their close, and you heard Dr. Kovac tell you, that wouldn't have saved Rylee's life. It wouldn't. Don't think that the failure to run over to Ryelee and try to render aid means that Bill's guilty of intending to kill Ryelee. Bill did exactly what you would expect if he did believe Ryelee was a threat, to still maintain some distance from him and talk to 911. Officers told you, not just Bill, other officers told you that the number one priority when they respond to a situation like this is to secure the scene. Because if there's still an active threat, you're not going to be able to perform aid if there's still a threat for an attack on officers or others. That wasn't just Bill who told you that. That was officers. Current police officers told you, number one, always make sure the scene is secure. And if Rylee's still a threat to Bill, it's not secure. Remember, we heard from Officer Shabalski. He told you that this was the second day on his own. He was not even 3 months into being a sworn police officer with Waupaca Police Department. Had just got done with field training officers. This was his second shift on his own. His first emergency call he ever responded to on his second day on his own. And what did Officer Shabilsky do? He remained calm. Because he told you why that's so important for people to remain calm, to provide details, to make sure officers know of the information they need so that rescue can come, additional officers can respond. Bill remained calm because that's what he was trained to do. Just like every other officer who responded. That doesn't mean Officer Shabalski, his heart wasn't racing. His adrenaline wasn't going. It probably was. But he knew he needed to control that and remain calm for everybody. We also know Bill's mind that night was clear. He didn't have any alcohol in his system. He didn't have any drugs in his system. He had some nicotine and he had some caffeine. But Ryelee was on meth. And we heard Dr. Kovac tell you what meth does to an individual, and Officer Grant tell you what meth does to an individual. Impulsive, unpredictable, violent, aggressive. That is exactly the Ryelee we saw in that video. Aggressive, unpredictable. When he lunges towards Bill and grabs that gun, something Ryelee never would have done had he not been on meth. He was unpredictable. State wants you to believe couldn't have been an accident. Bill never said it was an accident, that Ryelee pulled the gun and the gun went off. But if Ryelee pulled that gun and Bill's finger did hit that trigger, in that moment when everything happened so quickly, Bill's number one thought is, my finger hit that trigger. I shot him. I had that gun. I shot him. He came at me. I had to do it. Those were Bill's words. You never heard Bill's words saying, I wanted to kill Ryelee. I'm glad I killed Ryelee. He never said any of that. Tiffany told you Ryelee went at Bill and the gun went off. Tiffany told you in those words that it was an accident. The state tried to also show you all of these text messages from Bill's phone, showing how he intended to kill Ryelee, where he said, I'm hunting down thieves. He also said, I'm working on some paperwork, hunting down the third. He's not telling somebody he's going to get his gun and drive around hunting down somebody. It means I'm trying to find out who took my animals so I can get them and bring them home safely. Whoever took them signed their own death sentence. Because whoever took them, Bill knew, didn't know how to properly care for them or handle them. And they were venomous. They were going to bite that person and kill them. That's what he meant by signing their own death sentence. Not, I'm going to go kill whoever found my animals. Because we never heard any of those messages because they didn't exist. Solving it on the streets. It's exactly what Bill did. He was going around on the streets trying to find information. Just that night, he went to Tara's house to try to get more information at that time about his animals. There's no text messages on Bill's phone. I'm going to kill whoever did this. I'm going to kill Ryelee. I found out Rylee's involved. I'm going to go kill him. I'm going to shoot whoever did this. There's no threats. How many of us have gotten so upset we've said, I'm so upset I could kill you? That wasn't even Bill's words. Bill never even said anything near that because he wasn't so upset he wanted to kill somebody. He was trying to find his animals and bring them home safely. I also want you to think about this. If Bill intended to kill Ryelee, what sort of evidence do you think we would have seen in this trial? If Bill had that gun, when he got out of his car and he was close to Ryelee earlier before the video kicked on, if he intended to kill Ryelee, why didn't he shoot Ryelee right then and there? Because he didn't intend to kill Ryelee. He didn't intend to use the gun. He didn't want to use the gun. If Bill intended to kill Ryelee, why was the gun shot in his right armpit? If Ryelee was on his knees when Bill shot him, why would Bill deliberately go to his right armpit and shoot him? Ryelee wasn't shot in the head. He wasn't shot in the back. He wasn't shot directly in the chest. If Bill intended to kill Ryelee, why would he intend to shoot him in the right armpit? If Bill intended to kill Ryelee that night, you heard, this is a double-barrel shotgun. 2 triggers. Both barrels are loaded. The same trigger or trigger area. 1 trigger for the left barrel, 1 trigger for the right barrel. If Bill intended to kill Ryelee, why wouldn't he shoot him a second time? Because he didn't intend to kill Ryelee. When the shot went off and Ryelee let go of the gun and fell down is when Bill backed away. Because he didn't intend to shoot him. He didn't intend to kill him. If Bill intended to kill Ryelee, why immediately call 911 as soon as he could? As soon as Ryelee was shot, Bill asked Tiffany, "Where is my phone? We need to call 911. Tiffany had just had his phone. They get in his car, they find the phone, she dials it, hands it to Bill, and he's immediately talking to 911. Why? If he intended to kill Ryelee, if he wanted Ryelee to die, why would he call 911 at all? Why wouldn't he sit around and wait to call 911? Tara told you as soon as she came outside, Bill was on the phone with somebody. If Bill intended to kill Ryelee, why wouldn't he just jump in his car and leave? And just leave Ryelee there? Because he cares for Ryelee. He didn't intend to shoot him. He didn't intend to kill him that night. State tries to argue to you that Bill testified about all of his officer training, yet he was terrified of Ryelee. As though police officers can't get scared in situations. When we were here for jury selection, a lot of you indicated, I could never be an officer because of the situation that they have to put themselves in. We all know officers, despite their years of training and experience, get scared in situations. As the judge told you, Bill doesn't need to prove his innocence. The state is bound to prove Bill guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a reason that Bill's on this side and the state's on this side. Because over here, Bill starts with the presumption of innocence. The state wants you to find Bill guilty. Imagine there's a river flowing right between these two tables. Raging river. The state, in order to get Bill from innocent to guilty, needs to build a bridge. A bridge of evidence that you can hoist Bill on your shoulders and cross over that river to their side. That evidence needs to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that Bill's guilty. The judge also told you that if you can reconcile the evidence with any reasonable hypothesis consistent with Bill's innocence, you should do so. And Ryelee reaching at Bill, grabbing that gun and pulling it isn't just a reasonable hypothesis in this case. It's consistent with the DNA evidence. It's consistent with Dr. Kovac's testimony. It's consistent with the neighbor's testimony. It's consistent with the video that we all saw. It's consistent with that timeline that you saw we put together as this trial went on. It all points to the same conclusion. It's not just a reasonable hypothesis. It's the truth of what happened. That Ryelee came at Bill, grabbed that gun, and the gun went off. It was an accident, not a crime that Bill committed that night. That's why I'm asking you, during your deliberations, ignore the sympathy and the emotion that all of us feel on this case. Look at the evidence that's been presented and look at the truth of what happened after that video goes off and return a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
What are your thoughts, folks? How would you vote if you were on a jury today in this case? And how long do you think it's going to take the jury to come back with a finding? This one is going to be interesting to know, and I hope you're putting your comments down below. Thanks for your support of Profiling Evil, and please watch for us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, and check out Profiling Evil podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. I hope your weekend is settled a little bit, and I hope after binging on true crime and these horrendous stories all week that you'll take time to fill your bucket with some really good stuff and try to offset all the ugliness that the true crime genre brings into your lives. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon at the next crime scene.